Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
You have to run to stay in front. Welcome.
Unfiltered on Past the Wire TV. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unfiltered on Past the Wire TV with Michael Wilson, my co-host, John Stettin here, and we are here to talk the Test of Champions, the Belmont Stakes, one of my favorite races of all time. I'm a little heartbroken that it's lost some of its luster and prestige and stature, but we'll get to that in a minute. You've got something you want to touch base on about a previous show first, so let's get that out of the way, and then we'll go Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, so I'm not apologizing for my sentiment on the last show regarding Wayne Potts shouldn't be in the sport. I made an error in terms of what I stated when I stated what had happened, and I've read the article since to clarify. So what had happened in that race was Wayne had a horse that ran, and when it pulled up, the vet wanted and suggested to van it off. And so the claim wouldn't be voided. He didn't want the horse vanned off. That's the point of the story. That's what it is. And moving on.
Okay. I'll weigh in briefly. Still bad. Still don't like it, but all right. That's in the rear view now. At least we clarified it. And this is a positive show. Let's talk Belmont.
Yeah, we're going Belmont. We're going Belmont.
I'm already upset enough about the Belmont because the 1.5 mile Belmont Stakes, that was the Test of Champions, the third jewel of the Triple Crown, is now kind of almost an afterthought. People, it doesn't count as much. It's not as important. It's not as prestigious. And it's still one of the toughest races for a 3-year-old to win in the history of the game, you know? I love the Belmont. Like I said, one of my favorite races. I'm so disappointed that people don't feel the same about it, but it's a great race. And I've made some of my biggest scores in the Belmont. And the Birdstone win over Smarty Jones, and the article I wrote about that on Dan Torgman's site back at the time. Oh, Dan, please forgive me. I forget the name. Anonymous Racing. How could I do that? I apologize. Anonymous is what started Past the Wire. When we were all screaming at my table after everybody at the table said, single Smarty Jones, no, got to use Birdstone. And we were all screaming, get him, Edgar, get him, Edgar, get him, Edgar. He wins. We sit down. The whole place was giving us the death stare. Forget about it. Nobody wanted to see it happen except me. But the Belmont Stakes this Saturday. You know, I'm guilty of something very bad here. I've formed, and something I always try not to do. I have an early opinion on the race, which I hate having, but you know, I'll hedge and say I haven't handicapped yet. So when I actually do the race, maybe my opinion will change, but I have a hard time seeing how one particular horse is going to get beat, at least this early juncture. But what I really want to talk about, and what I think is interesting, is how do you train a horse in today's game when we hardly run 1.5 mile, 3-year-olds on the dirt? Some of these may never do that again. How do you properly train a horse to run 1.5 miles on the dirt in June, a 3-year-old, when they've never done it? They may never do it again. Our game is not really built around that. Are there pitfalls? Can you do too much? Can you do too little? What do you do?
So I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? So you said, how do you properly train a horse to run 1.5 miles? And to be honest, I don't think it's done anymore. You know, to me, and it's these route races are a passion of mine because, as you said, John, the race is the Test of Champions because it is not easy to win 1.5 mile race. Okay. It is very difficult to prepare for a 1.5 mile race. And so what I've told people is, as soon as you get over 1 mile and a 16th, that's when real training comes in. Okay, that's when you're separating the boys from the men. Okay, and or the women from the girls. You know, we have a lot of great female trainers nowadays, so I don't want to be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So if you go to Europe, there's still a prestige in endurance races such as this. And mile and a half is not too much of an endurance. If we go back to what our horses were initially bred for, they were initially bred to run 3-4 mile heats in one day. And if we then dial it back into the golden era of racing, and before that, we saw a lot of mile and a quarter, mile and a half, 2 mile races. Nowadays, we don't see it as much because the question is it the breed, or is it also coupled with the fact that most trainers can't properly train a horse for a mile and a half? And it's a balance, I think. So I was having a conversation with Paulo Lobo the other day, and we were talking about training horses and the different things that, you know, he's done in the past with getting horses ready for races and the different things I did getting horses ready for races. And there's a lot of different things nowadays that kind of change that. So I don't think anybody does too much. Okay, so let's start there, John. Nobody at this stage does too much to get the horses ready for the Belmont Stakes. Almost everybody does too little. So I think the bigger thing that you're seeing now is we're seeing with this race is if you don't have to run, let's just skip it because, you know, had to have to train the horse to get ready for the mile and a half and then to have to keep going through the season. You know, it's much easier to skip. And I mean, what's the purse on the Belmont this year, John? What, 1.5 million or something?
I don't even know.
Yeah, and we've got guys skipping it to target what, the Haskell, the Travers, the Iowa Derby. I mean, what else are you pointing towards in the summertime, right? So why not run? So I want to give a couple examples. One, which I thought was fantastic, when I saw a horse trounce horses at a mile and a half distance when he was running against superior horses. And that was a horse I worked with called the Tin Man. Okay, so nowadays in racing, trainers, and those of you who are trainers who are watching this show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Most trainers are held hostage by their exercise riders, whether we want to believe it or not.
Okay.
So there is a make money quick idea that runs around racing nowadays because exercise riders can make 15 to 20 bucks per horse they get on as a freelance rider. So if you're not willing to pay them a salary significant enough, that overcompensates that, because some of these guys will rush from barn to barn, get on 15, 20 horses a morning, okay, at $15 to $20 a head. So that adds up quick. So some riders will use this to say, no, I'm not going to go jog a mile and gallop a mile and a half. I could ride 3 horses and make 3 times as much as what you're asking me to do. So
that's an interesting thing that I think a lot of people don't realize or know about. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, so it is a pain in the ass, to be honest, to try and get a rider to say, hey, look, take your time with this horse. And so when I train, I paid guys as much as I could to make sure that each horse got 40 to 45 minutes out in the morning. But you are seeing this hustle culture, and a lot of it is surrounding this freelance rider ability to make a lot of money in the morning and then do nothing in the afternoon and just relax. So getting riders to actually take the time to do it is the first hurdle that you have to cross to get these horses to train up to the race. So
trainers have to actually acquiesce to the exercise riders who want to be done by 11 o'clock, go have breakfast in the track kitchen, and then be off for the rest of the day, and don't want to gallop a horse 2 miles or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, you would think even the big guys, but there is such a shortage of staff in racing nowadays, and a shortage of quality staff in racing nowadays, that a lot of times you're playing this balancing act of, let me keep you happy while getting you do what I need you to do. And so, you know, different incentives of giving them more purse money is a thing, but most horses nowadays don't even gallop a mile and a half in the morning to train. So let alone breeze it, let alone be able to run it. So I was going to give a point about a horse called the Tin Man. So I worked with the Tin Man with Richard Mandela. And I remember one morning, and Richard, if you hear this, you know, I'm calling you out on this because it was a mistake that worked. So we were training the Tin Man, getting him ready for the Arlington Million as an 8-year-old. And he was doing great. I mean, he won a couple grade ones, I think, that year already. And he was on the top of his game. And there was this massive debate on who's better, English Channel or Cacique. And I said, whoa, who's better? I mean, the best turf horse in the country, you're not even in the mix. You know, you're not even talking about the Tin Man. So we're getting ready for the Arlington Million. I think we're a month out. And we train him one morning, and Richard comes in the barn and he is just mad. He's like, why the hell did nobody tell me about this? We're like, what do you mean nobody told you about? What were we supposed to tell you about? He says, today's turf works. We said, okay. And he says, we galloped the Tin Man early. So the Tin Man had gone out and already galloped, and he'd galloped 1.5 miles and, you know, full training at, I think it was like 6 a.m. He says, we got to tack him back up. We got to take him back out there to turf course. He got to go work. So we tacked him back up and breezed him at 10 o'clock. He breezed 1 mile on the grass at 10 o'clock after already galloping 1.5 miles in the morning for training.
Wow. Okay.
So horse comes back next day, fresh, looks great, looks fantastic. So we did that, I think, once or twice more before the Arlington Million. So this horse trained twice a day, gallop 1.5 miles in the morning, then go breeze 1 mile on the turf course, getting ready, which again, most horses you'll never see breeze 1 mile, period, right? Mandela is one of the few that'll still breeze a horse 7/8 or 1 mile. So when we get to the Arlington Million and we're running against English Channel and Cacique, and they let him get to the lead and he's clicking off 12, 48, 112. We're like, this race is over. They're never going to touch him because he's trained twice a day at these fractions for the last month. So anyways, they never could catch him. He pulled.
I remember the race. Yeah.
And that's a situation where that is proper training of a horse to go a route, either twice a day, give him more miles, breeze him further. But nowadays, and we're looking at this Belmont Stakes, most of these horses are breezing 5/8, right? They still have in the Belmont Stakes, they still have another 7/8 of a mile to run. So we're in a sport that's semi-strange, and we hit on it when we were talking about lactic acid thresholds in the show that we just did. We are the only sport that does not train our athletes as hard as they will eventually have to perform in the afternoon. And so in every other sport in the world, you train harder than you play, so the game is easy. We tend to train less and then hope that they can then get the distance in the afternoon. So to answer your question, we do too little, not enough.
That's an extremely interesting take, and I think something that a lot of people don't understand or don't realize. I for one would be one of them. It's a pitfall, I would imagine. That probably has. I mean, there's no way to ever quantify this, but if that's been going on, let's say 15, 20 years since, the game has evolved to what it is today, that's probably impacted 75% of the races, or course, a lot of horses are a legitimate shot at winning and has impacted the results across the board of many a Belmont Stakes.
Well, and so if you go down the list of trainers, and I think, somebody called me out on Twitter saying I'm a Baffert sympathizer. And I think you're hugely polarizing everything when you're in one camp or the other. I do know that Baffert is probably the best trainer around in terms of peaking horses, understanding how to train horses. So regardless,
that anybody that watches racing could really intelligently argue against that.
Yeah. So, regardless if there's other things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, there is nobody I've ever been around. Mandela is probably the second one on that list that can actually train a horse and get it to peak on a day. And Baffert does that through training his horses harder than everybody else. Okay. So again, that program, and this goes back to, is it the breed or is it the horses? Right. So
I got to say, Chad Brown's put himself in that conversation, but go ahead.
In terms of, Chad's fantastic.
Getting the horse to peak on the right day, man.
Exactly. So Chad's fantastic peaking on the right day. Again, what I will counter that is most of his races are on grass. So it's a little bit easier.
The Derby wasn't on grass. Preakness wasn't on grass.
The Preakness. But he's got two. He's got 2 Preaknesses under his belt. Okay. Right. So what I'm saying is, route dirt races are one of the toughest things to prepare a horse for. It takes a lot of training, and that training is very hard in terms of not hard on them, but it's not easy for horses to do. Okay. It takes a progression, and it takes a significant horse to be able to withstand the amount of training on dirt to make it. Now, back when I got into the game 18 years ago, there were a lot more of those horses walking around that you could train on them and train on them and train on them, and they just keep asking for more. Nowadays, again, maybe going over to the breeding side, we don't have as many of those horses around that you can hammer on in terms of getting them fit to run these route distances. So trainers have to adjust and train them easier in hopes that they'll make it. I think it's a catch-22 a little bit, but it's tough to train a dirt horse. So Baffert tends to breeze his horses faster and tends to breeze them longer than most other trainers. Now, when you see a Baffert horse working 59 or 58, and these fast times, he's not pushing and smooching and whipping and trying to get the horse to do it. Those horses are in the bridle dragging the rider, okay? He's always cutting them back an eighth more than what the horse is probably capable of doing. So if they're working 6 furlongs, they're actually working out 7/8, and they're galloping out 7/8 with a
And I love when you see those Baffert 6 furlongs and 111 workouts. Love it.
Well, and so then they gallop out, they gallop out 7/8 probably in 124. And then they'll continue on out to the mile. So if you're looking at it, the horse is really actually breezing about a mile, close enough to race pace, right? Maybe just a couple seconds slower. So that's typically why he capitalizes and dominates in the route dirt racing division. You're not going to do it breezing horses half miles and 5/8 and hoping you show up on the day and can beat a horse that's just as physically gifted, that is fitter. It's just, you're not going to beat it. So a lot of it comes down to just training these horses so they have enough wind to continue to carry the ability throughout the race.
Interesting. The Belmont this year, well, like I said, to me, it's always an interesting and fascinating race. One thing I'll throw out there, we threw it out for the Kentucky Derby. I think it's factual, even though a lot of people disagree with it. Threw it out for the Preakness. I think that's factual. A lot of people disagree with it. We've had Mike Smith and John Velasquez both validate what we said about the Derby and the Preakness. They said the Derby, since the point system changed from graded earnings to points, you had to be 1-2 in order to win the Derby. Nonsense. Pace and trip determines the winner. The Preakness, everybody says Pimlico is speed favoring. You got to win on the lead. Okay, early voting did win on the lead, but you don't have to. People say that the Belmont, you got to be up there early. They don't come from far back to win the Belmont. Nonsense. I've seen as many Belmonts as anybody that probably going to watch this show, and I've seen them come from everywhere on the racetrack to win. Pace and trip has a much bigger impact and over time will lead more, more results of you being right than thinking you've got to be 1-2 on the turns of Big Sandy in order to get home first. Every race, every year is different, and that bias is just not really there. It's very misleading. It depends on the horses and the pace and the trips. This year we've got something very interesting. We've got a filly in there from Todd Pletcher. He's already won the Belmont with a filly. Rags to Riches beat Curlin. A filly, not the filly you thought might be in there, Secret Oath. She's not in there, but Nest is. What's your take on Nest being in the Belmont Stakes? Good spot for her, bad spot for her? I think it's a interesting spot for her.
I think, yeah, I'd say it's interesting. She wouldn't be a filly that I would have screamed out and said, oh, she needs to go to the Belmont Stakes after the Kentucky Oaks. I think she might be the right type, and I think she might be doing well at the right time. So looking at her work where she was in company with Mo Donegal, she, to me, looked like the better horse in the work. I think Mo Donegal is a significant horse. Obviously, in this race, I didn't like him as much going into the Derby, but she stayed with him pretty evenly, and it looked like she still had plenty of horse underneath her while he was still kind of working to stay with her. again, we went back to fillies versus boys and we talked about weight differences and how much of a difference that plays. She's significantly smaller. She's significantly lighter than most of these horses. Same thing with Rags to Riches, right? She was, if you look at her versus Curlin, it's, you know, David versus Goliath. She was a phenomenal filly, but she was a mid-size, you know, above average size filly. She wasn't a Zenyatta behemoth. And I think those types of fillies do lend well to the Belmont distance because you are carrying a lot less weight to get yourself around that track. You're much lighter on your feet. So I think she might actually fare well in this race. You and I might be on the same horse. I saw Rich Strike's work and said, yeah, good luck. I think he's actually the real deal. I don't think he's a one-shot wonder. So
yeah, I do. We differ there, but I want to hit on something a little harder that you mentioned that I think could be a big help to a lot of people analyzing the race and watching works and stuff like that. Nest and Mo Donegal worked together. They have been working together. That's no secret. And you mentioned that it looked like Nest was going a little bit better and Mo Donegal was having a harder time or a hard time keeping up with her or working a bit to keep up with her. Now, if you're a player, okay, and you're handicapping and you're analyzing the race, and on paper you like Mo Donegal, but you see that work, what is it that can make you stay on your opinion of Mo Donegal? Like what's different in the morning and the afternoon? Like why shouldn't you just say, you know what, he can't keep it up with her in the morning? I've got to think Nest is better or lean to Nest. If you like Mo Donegal, how do you kind of get around what you saw in that work?
So again, that's 5/8 of a mile, and now we're going to run a mile and a half. So I think it's a big difference. I think so. Nest has a much more efficient stride than Mo Donegal. Mo Donegal can run. He really kind of reaches for ground. He pulls in front a lot more than she does. She kind of has a stride where she throws them out, and she's just really efficient of how she uses herself. He kind of really works hard to do what he does. It's just kind of how he's always been. You can see it when he wins the Wood, and it works for him. So I can't knock him. When you look at it, you say, oh, she's better, but she might not be. A lot of it comes down to how that specific horse is doing within themselves. If you're going to ask me who's better, I'd say Mo Donegal is a better horse. Again, you could also say, John, and maybe this is what the question that you're trying to ask is, some horses are better workhorses than other horses. There are some horses that are good workhorses. Some are not. So it comes down to I think the constitution of that horse and how they're going to perform in the afternoon, the competitive nature that they have in the afternoon. Nest has had everything her way her entire, since she started, and she kind of faced competition in the Oaks and she ran second, but she ran hard. Mo Donegal, I think, has maybe overcome a bit more adversity in his races and really had to kind of prove something.
Go ahead.
No. That's, I don't know where you were going with the work versus, because I was wrong on the Derby looking at the works.
Yeah, no, I was just curious because I think based on, and again, I'll hedge because, to me, it's not really a hedge. I don't make up my mind until I actually dissect the race, and I like to go in without any preconceived notion or idea until I actually do the race in accordance with my methodology and come up with an opinion. But just going off everything I've watched with these 3-year-olds coming along during the year and, replaying the Derby trip in my mind and watching the replay a couple of times, I think Mo Donegal, without a doubt, is the horse that they have to beat in the Belmont Stakes. I really do. I think he's going to be a handful to beat. And I will be surprised if when I actually, and this has happened before, so it's not like it's shocking, but I'll be surprised if when I actually do the race and handicap and form an opinion that Mo Donegal is not where I land. And he might not be. Once I do the race, I may say, you know what, he's got no shot. But right now, just going off, what we know and what we've watched, I think he's going to be a handful. I think he had a really wide trip in the Derby, lost a lot of ground at some key points. I like that he missed the Preakness, and I think, I think the Belmont's kind of got his name written on it for him to run one of his better races. And I'm not a believer in Rich Strike. I think he caught a perfect storm in the Derby. I guess we'll find out in the Belmont whether or not that's true. And there's another horse I'm not really a believer in that a lot of people like, and is probably going to be the wise guy horse, maybe even the second choice, or if not the favorite in the Belmont, and that's We the People.
Yeah.
I think he's coming in off a race that's dressed up, looks a little better than it was. A wet sealed track, draw off as the speed. You got that notion that, oh yeah, speed wins the Belmont. And slow pace. He may get an advantage that way. He may get a walk the dog kind of merry-go-round trip. You never know, but I think he's a little overrated, and I think he's going to be overbet and overhyped. Your take, We the People.
Yeah, I think he's fourth on my list.
Wow.
I think Mo Donegal's better. I think Ness could be better, and I think Rich Strike is better.
Right. Now you're a believer in Rich Strike. I find that really, really interesting. Talk to me a little about Rich Strike, and let me ask you this way, okay? Because I think it's a tougher question. Why am I wrong thinking that he caught a perfect storm in the Derby and could be a one-hit wonder? Because I've been on record saying he could be another one of those win the Derby and that's it kind of horses, like Mind That Bird, Super Saver, Always Dreaming, Lily T. I mean, it's a long list of horses that win the Derby and then they don't win no more.
Yeah. Personally, I saw him and I thought one-hit wonder after the Derby. Okay. And, physically, he's kind of maturing into more of he's starting to look better as, going into the race. I had no idea who he was. Then he won. And then I kind of watched photos and videos of him and said, he's built to be actually a significant two-turn dirt horse. And a lot of it changed for me when I saw his work at Churchill in the afternoon the other day, and seeing him do what he did was quite impressive, the way he did it, and saying, okay, so this horse can run. And maybe what it is for him, which again, I think Mr. Reed's going to have to ask himself this horse seems to switch on when he's on an actual racetrack versus a training center. And it seemed like going into the Derby, what everybody had said is, and Eric Reed said, this horse changed into just a beast once he got to Churchill Downs. You see him working the same way at Churchill Downs. So sometimes training centers are fantastic for some horses that you need to switch off a little bit. You train them harder and you get them to the racetrack and they know their job in the afternoon, but each horse has a key to unlock their talent. And some horses, and maybe it is what it is for this horse, is he gets on the racetrack and he sees other horses and he starts training harder and training stronger and he gets better and better and better. So his work is what I saw the other day and said, this horse, to go as easy as he went, to do it as well as he did, and to look as great as he did in the work, this is no one-hit wonder horse.
Interesting.
And he might be developing at the right time.
Yeah, it could be, things clicked, like they say, the light bulb went off, clicked, and, now he knows his job, but he's going to have to prove it to me. I'm not a believer.
I don't know if he'll beat. I think Mo Donegal and him are going to really be the two that I'm looking at and thinking that they're the two best. I've never understood this. I think Rodolphe Brissett is a good trainer. I don't think he's great. I think he's good. But there's this overhype with everything he does, whether it's a horse that wins or it's I'll hear people saying, oh, he's a great trainer. And it's like, well, where are the stats? Yes, he wins, but this guy has been given top quality horses from the moment he walked out of Bill Mott's barn. Okay. He's not like a Brad Cox who had to come from the bottom and work his way up with claimers. He's been handed quality stock from the word go. And so when I know that and I see that, I say, okay, well, he does well. He does pretty well and the horses run well, but he's not outperforming the quality that he's been given. And so We the People was impressive. He beat nobody on a sealed track. So to me, I ask, why is this horse overhyped? Why does everybody get so excited about him? Because I see it over and over and over again with these types of horses that Rodolphe gets. And you know, granted, Triple Crown winner that he had in his barn was trained by somebody else. Now, if they sent him back to him, would that horse still have won the Triple Crown? Is my question. Would justify. So I think We the People's a good horse. I think he'll do some damage throughout the year. I think he'll always be a horse that'll be there. I don't think he's this super wonder horse that everybody thinks he is.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And, you know, you bring out an interesting point about, you know, not really the single Rodolphe Brissett out, but, you know, you got a guy there that worked for Belmont. So what is he around? He's around all really good horses, Belmont's barn. Okay. And, you know, like you said, you know, he goes out on his own and he gets a lot of nice horses, you know, never really had to work with those, you know, claimers that kind of give you a, you know, Harvard education real fast because you've got to, you know, work through them. And that applies to different aspects of the game. I remember years back, a rider named Mark Guidry, who I'm sure you've heard of.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Came to New York very late in his career. He had ridden a long time in Louisiana and Chicago, and, you know, was riding $5,000 claimers at Hawthorne Park, you know, and was really late in his career when he decided to make a stop in New York. It was not the typical, you know, try New York big circuit time for a guy, you know what I mean? He really did it late in his career. And all of a sudden he showed up in New York and used to ride a lot of long shots. People wouldn't bet on him and didn't, you know, ride. And I made score after score after score betting on this guy. And my mindset was this guy is used to riding $5,000 Hawthorne claimers in the dead of winter that probably have all kinds of issues. Now you're putting him on these Bill Mott or whomever, Christophe Clement, you know, maiden special weight allowance horses. These are going to feel like, you know, getting out of a Dodge Dart, you know, 1976 with 147,000 miles into, you know, a Maserati Quattraport with, you know, 1,200 miles, and you press the button and boom, you know, all of a sudden your stomach's vibrate. And this guy's going to feel like he's on everything he's sitting on is like a Porsche or a Cadillac or something, you know. And sure enough, he was popping at $30, $40, $28, you know, and just riding lights out. So I think that kind of parallels a little bit with you know, trainers and what you alluded to with you know, Brissett.
Well, and if anything, and this is how I've always looked at life. When life is tough, you get better. I mean, it either breaks you or you get better. And so if you look at every top athlete, if you look at every top horseman, none of them were handed anything. I mean, there's a lot of guys who get to the top and stay at the top because they had to fight for every scrap they ever got, and they had to figure it out along the way and improve. You don't learn a lot by getting handed stuff and getting handed top quality, because I will tell you this. Ask any top trainer what it's like to train a top horse. And I've had owners ask questions like this, and you kind of laugh. Well, what makes you think that you can train a good horse because you've never had a good horse? And it's like, give me a loaded gun with a sight on it that can, you know, laser sight that it'll point right at the target, and all I have to do is just pull the trigger. It hits the bullseye most of the time, right? Versus, okay, it's you're trying to take a water pistol and hit the same target from the same distance. You know, you got to figure out how to get it there. So when you know how to do that, most trainers who are good will say good horses train themselves. Just stay the hell out of their way.
A loaded gun is dangerous in anybody's hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's true. Anybody else on your Belmont radar that's kind of under the radar?
I think Creative Minister is a good horse. I think he's a horse that's going to continue. I mean, McPeak won it with Sarava, right? Didn't he win the Belmont with Sarava?
Yeah, absolutely. 70 to 1 or some ridiculous price like that.
So Kenny has the ability. I think probably Creative Minister's the best horse I've seen come out of McPeak's barn this year. I really liked Smile Happy earlier in the year, and then I've kind of seen Creative Minister now and say, this one might be the better horse in the barn. But to me, I think it comes down a lot to Mo Donegal, Rich Strike, and seeing how everything plays out.
Now, let me ask you this, as a trainer. When people say, "Oh, he's a mile and a half horse," "Oh, he looks like a mile and a half horse," a lot of times what they're referring to is just the basic, because he comes off the pace or he's closing, that he's going to like the mile and a half. And I think that's a complete illusion. A lot of times you don't have the same kick going a mile and a half that you may have going a mile or a mile and an eighth, when it looks like you're closing fast and they think, oh, well, the extra distance is going to propel him right to the lead. I think that's complete nonsense. But what, from a trainer's perspective, can people look for to say, you know what, that really is a quote mile and a half horse from a horseman's perspective?
A lot of it comes down, for me personally, would be efficiency of how they move, efficiency of how they use themselves, how much ground they cover, how easy it is for them. I think that's really why you saw with American Pharaoh, him excel at the mile and a half. Same thing with Justify. Those horses were just extremely efficient. I mean, I think Arrogant, the same, would have been, if he ran at that time of year, would have been the same. So horses that just, it's easy for them, right? And so if it's easy for them, they're not working too hard. They can keep doing it all day long. Those are the horses that really come down to being kind of those mile and a half horses. It's not he revved up late. If you're not warmed up by 3/4 of a mile into the race and a mile and a quarter race, you're probably slow. I mean, that's kind of, you can probably only close when the speed dies. So it's not necessarily that. You're just looking for a horse that makes it all easy and still has enough gas in the tank that they can finish the job.
Interesting. We'll wrap this up with two things. First, on Past the Wire, we've got a free Belmont Stakes seminar where we're going to talk in depth, in detail, deep dive the Belmont Stakes, the supporting stakes. I'll tell you whether or not Flightline is going to win the Met Mile and why. Lot of great stuff. So if you want a deep dive, it's free. Just check out pastthewire.com. It'll tell you how to get a reservation. If you missed the live version, there's a replay. But here's what I'm going to ask you and tell you at the same time, because it's a question, but I'm going to tell you what I look for as a mile and a half horse. And it extends beyond that, because it extends to, well, can this horse who's won his 2 or 3 races on the lead possibly sit? It's the same thing I look for. I look for, in looking at a horse, obviously they've never run a mile and a half yet, so we don't know. I don't look for that horse that's closing. I look for a horse that when I watch their replays, they have the ability to shut off and relax and run when they're supposed to run. Okay, when the rider cues them, they give it to them, and when the rider doesn't cue them, they're not rank, they're relaxed, they're kind of just doing it on their own and holding their position, quote, shutting off, to me, because that tells me that during the running of the race, a mile and a half, there's a time that the rider can just let the horse sit, go, gallop along, maintain his position, have his cruising speed, and then ask him, and he's going to give it to him. So I look for a horse that's able to turn on and turn off, because I think that helps them get the distance and also helps a horse do things that maybe you didn't think he could do, like a speed horse that's won on the lead because he was the only speed. Well, today there's other speed. Is he going to be able to sit? Well, yeah, he shuts off, so he'll do what the rider tells him. Am I on target or am I off base? And
you're
something to look for at a mile and looking for a mile and a half horse.
You're 100% on target. So, when I talk about efficiency of stride and efficiency of movement, that's a big key. But the other key is the mental side of the game, which is to not overuse yourself too early in a race, to be patient. And it's a big thing with horses going a route. They have to be able to switch off. They have to be able to relax. And then once they relax, they fall into the stride that is right for them and the timing of their stride that is right for them, to where it's a walk in the park. They're just galloping along. It's simple. They're not overusing themselves. They're not using too much energy. And then all of a sudden, it's time to go, and they're right there waiting for you. And so we teach that a lot in the morning, of trying to get these horses to switch off. You know, if you're too on the bit, you're too dragging yourself too much all of the time, you
Right.
can't switch off in a race. Same thing when you're dealing with some of these horses that want to be a little bit too tough early. Put another horse alongside them, they won't ever switch off. So when you can understand and run your race and be completely switched off, so you're there when the rider asks you, it makes a world of difference in any route race.
Right, interesting. I apologize for the background noise. The mowers are here. The dogs are acting up a little bit, but there you have our early thoughts on the Belmont Stakes. The draw is later today. A lot more on Past the Wire and Past the Wire TV. We've got the seminar coming up. We'll be back with another Unfiltered next week, and always a pleasure, Mike. I think we got a lot out of that. So thank you.
Awesome. No, absolutely a pleasure. Have a good one, guys.
All right. Ciao for now.
Here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
1,000 words fighting back, coming down to the finish. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is one stunning picture. Honorary B is full out now, second on the outside. If it's coming down the line, 1,000 words has done it.
Nobody does it better.